Yo, what's poppin'? It's Tommathan. We have the NA play-in preview. I had my funny haha. Let's all have a good time. Anyone can win at one earlier this week, but this is the real stuff. Getting into the nitty gritty. Who is making it out of here? Why are they? Why are two teams not making it out? That, this is where we're at right now. This is the most important weekend for any of these teams this year. Maybe Toronto's homestand is a little more important for them, but that's whatever. Here's the real stuff. So, Boston Uprising. This stage, because it's the same patch as Countdown Cup, exact same meta. We know what these teams like to run for the most part. Boston have been playing Valentine, Victoria, Seeker, Punk, Faith, Crimzo, and MCD. They've all seen playtime. Itzel and Mag have been firmly placed on the bench by Papa Punk. That's how it is. But they had a bit of ups and downs, and they have done some retooling to their thoughts on this meta. So to start off, it was a 3-1 against Houston, a 3-0 against Florida, and they look pretty damn good. Boston do have the best record out of all these teams in the past stage, right? We see that. But then they have a week off, and they come back, and they're playing Washington Glads. They lose 3-2 to Washington. They lose 3-1 to Glads. And this whole time, they're playing a double flex support with Crimzo MCD. You have Victoria out on the Sombra, and you have Valentine there. And suddenly, the meta's kind of shifted away from them. You see BAP gain a lot more prevalence. You see the double flex support kind of fall out of favor for a lot of teams. I mean, some teams like Atlanta are still playing it, but mostly not. And it just kind of fell out of favor. So what do? They come back. They play New York and Paris, two easy teams. They do win 3-1, but they do lose a map, right? And it's hard to tell if their adjustments work. When you have Faith come in on the Lucio, you have Seeker play most of the Sojourn. So it's hard to tell if these retools and these like readjustments from this meta are actually looking good for them or not, because like dropping a map to Paris never really looks good. Paris, the worst team this season by a significant margin, right? So that never looks great. It's very hard to tell how they actually do moving into these plans, but the adjustments were there, which is more than we can say for some of these other teams. Because if we can move over to the Washington Justice, they didn't really make those adjustments. But to be fair to them, they didn't play in that last week, so they didn't really have to. They're playing, standard. They can only play 5 guys unless they bring in Mike from geography class, Decay Assassin, Kalios, Krillin, and Opener. And they went 3-3. Not a bad stage. They lose to Dallas 3-1, but who wouldn't? Beat Shock 3-2. Beat New York 3-1, lose to Atlanta 3-0, beat Boston 3-2 in that second to last week, and then lose to Gladiators 3-1. So what does this look like for them, though? They really enjoy Assassin on the Sombra. Big fans. They really enjoy putting Opener on the Ana and Krillin on the Zen. They did that entire way through, basically. And Kalios playing both the Diva and the Zarya. But the biggest thing here is, towards the end especially, the aggression is still the name of the game for Washington. They don't really seem to have too many other tools. And if we saw that Boston couldn't handle it, so if there is a Washington-Boston matchup that happens to appear, it could be in Washington's favor unless Boston's figured out what they want to do. However, are Washington going to adapt? They didn't have to in this regular stage. But now that we're in the play-ins, the meta has shifted a bit. This double flex support maybe won't be as strong. Now, they were playing some Lucio still. Like when they're in that matchup against Boston on New Queen Street, you saw them play the Lucio while Boston played the double flex support. Boston did win that match, surprisingly. I think that Punk with no speed on the Zarya loses to the Kalios with speed on the Zarya, but Crimzo and MCD were that guy together that kind of put out enough damage to stop that. We'll see. I don't think Washington going to adapt nearly as well as Boston did. So that is the biggest thing for me with Washington. But, it's Washington. The K can always come out. He plays the Sojourn. He plays whatever he wants. He can come out and look damn good doing it. So I'll be interested to see what they plan on doing. If anything really changes, I'm not sure if anything will. And I'm a little worried for them. And then we have the Toronto Defiant, the worst record in the past 6 games at 2-4. And they seem like a little unsure of what they want to do, to be honest. Because they come out, right? They're playing Hisu, Finale, Hoppa, Charong, and Twilight. And they don't really mess around with the double flex support nearly as much as some of these other teams, or at all. But they lose to Atlanta 3-2. You lose to New York 3-2. Beat Shock 3-1, but it's a Shock that doesn't look very good. Same with Washington whenever they beat the Shock. That Shock didn't look really good. They were playing the Sombra stuff. They don't really know how to do it. One game later, they would find their feet, but to start off, nothing. And then lose to Vancouver 3-1. In the most recent week, lose to Florida 3-0 and beat a disgruntled, not really sure what they're doing, just here to have a good time Houston Outlaws who don't seem to be really trying in this last week. That didn't matter to them. So these wins are pretty Mickey Mouse, straight up. Those look like two good wins, but they're just not. They're not good wins. And it's pretty concerning. Now, in this last week, they did play Aldo and didn't really work out. They go back to finale. It's like, I don't know, they don't really know who they want to play yet. I think they're going to stay on with finale because he does have the better tracer of the two, who they seem to enjoy a bit more. They have taken Hisu off of the Somber in those first 2 weeks of play. He was firmly on it. Now he's been on the Sojourn those last two, and I don't know. The results are kind of mixed. As a team, they don't seem to be much better, but Hisu's definitely able to pop off and carry a bit more on the Sojourn, right? So probably a better look for them, but nothing spectacular, right? This team should be the worst going into it based off the results of the last 4 weeks. But on paper, they should be the best team. But the thing with the Toronto Defiant is paper doesn't really matter to them. Crumple it up, cut it up with some scissors. It's not real. It just isn't real. For the Toronto Defiant, if they're paper, they're losing to rock. Paper is losing to rock on the Toronto Defiant. That's how it is. And they're not looking great. So they should be the worst team going into this plan. They should be. But will they be? Hard to say. Now, Florida Mayhem. They probably are the best team looking at it from the past 2 weeks. And that's kind of standard with them because they're more of a team that peaks at the end of metas. They figure out what they want to do. They hone what they want to do and they run it. So we see they have Hydron checkmate. Exley's going to be firmly on the bench because Hydron has been crazy on the Sojourn. Someone able to play whatever. His Zarya has improved a lot through this stage. I don't know what the peak is for his Zarya. He probably hasn't reached it yet. And then you have Onimo, Sermajet, and Rupel, who has all seen gameplay, but in the past week, no Sermajet on the Lucio, just Onimo and Rupel, which I agree with. I don't think you need that super aggressive Sermajet Lucio gameplay like you did in the Summer Showdown, where you needed your Lucio to be kind of aggressive and really take charge. In this meta, the Lucio doesn't need to do that as much, so Onimo is a better fit, I think. Now, looking at this team, they lose to Glads 3-1, lose to Boston 3-0, then they go into the next week 3-2 win against Vancouver, 3-2 close loss against Atlanta, and then final week 3-0 against Defiant, 3-1 against Houston. Call it a day, and that's that. But again, that Houston team wasn't the same Houston caliber that beat the Dallas field. Wasn't the same guys. We've seen that from them plenty of times before this season. So Florida, they made a good adaptation there, bringing in Onimo. They were relying heavily on the Zarya at the beginning there. They shifted off of it a little bit, but they're still mostly playing that Zarya comp, right? It's interesting to see because they were setting up dives really good at the beginning of that stage, and it just kind of petered out. Because even those wins again, or those losses against Gladiators Boston, there looked like there was something there, specifically against the Gladiators. It looked like that something was going to come out of it, but it just kind of petered out a bit for them. But Florida, they're a team. They find their footing at the end. That's it. That's them. Now, if they suffer a similar fate as they have in other tournaments, where they look god awful to start and then they pick it up halfway against London and they reverse sweep, if they're going to look to do that again, that's troubling. That is troubling because there's no London here. There's no London on your screen. And none of these teams are really known for serial choking. I guess the Washington Justice get reverse swept kind of often, so you could say them. But for the most part, I don't think this team can afford to go down to one map or you're out in this tournament. I think there's too much on the line, and yeah, they have the mental to come back, but it's not an ideal situation, and I wouldn't risk it again. So, Florida should be the best. Will they be? Who knows? So I'm going to do my bracket now. Hit the bracket up. Let me cover that up so it looks real nice. There we go. So, starting off, we have the Florida Mayhem against the Boston Uprising. I think I like Florida a bit more here to make it through. Because here's the thing with Boston. I'm still not sure on those adaptations. I know what Florida's about. I know that they look good right now. I can't say the same about Boston. Boston could come out with this. And honestly, I like their backline more with Crimzo and Faith. I do like Punk more on the Zarya, on the Diva, whatever he chooses to play. But I like Hydron more than Seeker by a bit. And Checkmate Valentine's actually pretty close. I probably individually I shift that to Valentine, but as a team, Florida just seemed more in sync, which is normally Boston's strong suit. Is as a team they look better. Maybe individually they're not winning. I think they do win individually here, but I think Florida just have a better handle on things, and they've consistently done it. Now there is a world where Boston does win, and I'm currently considering that world, and I almost like it. I do like that world actually. Maybe that should be Boston. Florida typically don't start off too strong in tournaments themselves. We've seen it. They've lost pretty early. No, I'm gonna stick with Florida. I think Florida should be good enough, which would put Boston in the lower bracket. And then we have the Toronto Defiant and the Washington Justice. So Washington normally start tournaments extremely strong, and Toronto just don't look like they know what they're doing still. So I'm going to go with Washington. Right now, they should just win. But again, if they don't make the adaptations they need to, this could be a Toronto win pretty easily. This is extreme. This bracket will be wrong. There's no way this bracket's going to be correct. Some way, somehow, no matter what you think. If you get a good bracket, post your bracket down below. If you have a bracket and it ends up winning, that'd be crazy. That'd be unreal. You'd be a god. But even though it's just a mere 3 or 5 matches, that's hard. So I'm gonna go with Washington. They normally start off strong. Even if they don't have it all together, they probably can beat Toronto, to be honest. So Washington seemed good to me, which put Toronto in the lower bracket. So now you have Toronto and Boston. Toronto should be not the guys on paper, but I don't think Boston have that dog in them, to be honest with you. I think here's the thing about Toronto. They had the pressure in the Summer Showdown to perform. They did. This is the most pressure on them ever. There's no home crowd buff this time, sure. But look at this. They are 1 match away from losing it on this season. One of the highest spending teams cannot afford to miss playoffs. There's so much pressure. I think they're a team that will rise to the occasion here. They've proved they could. Boston is a team that, you know what, they didn't really do a lot. They've been just hanging around. They've been gatekeeping the bottom. And I don't think they had that dog in them to actually put out a team right now. I don't know. Whether this is copium, maybe. I think Toronto has that dog in them more than Boston. I think they've played under the pressure before and they've excelled. Third in the Summer Showdown. Third. That's good. That's damn good. So then we have going back up to the upper bracket between Florida and Washington. I like Florida here and putting Washington back in the lower bracket. So we get a rematch, actually, between Toronto and Washington. We get a rematch there. But the thing about Florida, I just think they look too good. They just look too good. And if I don't think Washington's actually going to find their footing here, I don't think they're actually going to make the adaptations that they probably should. And maybe they will, but I just don't think they will. And Decay, to put up that kind of performance 2-3 matches in a row, it'll be hard because you have Hydron on the other side. Hydron is no slouch. Hydron's probably the next best Sojourn here. Hydron might be the best Sojourn here. Like, straight up better than Decay. Consistently, he is. So, I don't know. I like that. And then we have the rematch between Washington and Toronto. Now, this is where you take the fan fiction, you write it up, you post it, because I'm locking in Toronto. This is Toronto fan copium. Sure. You know what? Maybe it is. But guess what? They can make that adaptation. Washington will not beat them twice in a row. Surely not. Toronto is due for one there. They're due for a win. This has been a rough 4 weeks. They are due for some wins as a team. Maybe not. But you know what? I'm locking in anyway. There's no pick'ems. I can't really lock anything in. It's just on the screen. But this is me locking this in verbally. So this is what I'm running. I have Florida and Toronto making it to the playoffs. And then Washington, Boston not. So let me know your bracket, of course. As always, thank you so much for watching. Like this video if you like and subscribe. If you enjoy this kind of content, I try to upload daily. There will be reviews this weekend. I will make a point to get them. I'm hyped. This is exciting. I hope Toronto does not lose. Goodbye.